he likes speaking to organisations about his simple observations of life and the lessons that can be drawn from them, and that's what he'll talk about today. So, Winston, welcome.
So, thank you. A lovely photo of me some 40 years ago. So, I tell you what, I was amazed to see Tony Phillips here today. All those years since I've seen him, and he hasn't lost any height. He was always that tall, and I hated it because you know how Australians feel about looking up to a pond. Not doing too badly in the cricket either at the moment. Yeah. So, tell me guys, how are you? So that gave me a range of answers. Every conference I talk at, I always ask how you are. And of course some people say good, some people say okay, some people say what's it to you? Now look, I know we can have lots of fun and talk and do all that and have a message, which I try to do, but really when I'm asking how you are, I'm checking out your attitude. Zig Ziglar, the American motivational speaker, God bless him, dearly departed, said it's your attitude, not your aptitude, that determines your altitude. And I reckon that's quite a good statement. So I've just checked out yours. I said, how are you? And some said good, well that's a good attitude. Some said fine, some said I don't know, and some said what's it to you? Now, I'm not an academic. I've got to walk my talk. I've got to be able to, you know, show you in practical ways. So if you ask me how I am at any time of the day, I'm always fantastic. It's 5:30 in the morning when the dogs wake me up to go for a walk on a pouring morning. The dogs say to me, how are you? I say, fantastic. My wife says to me, you're late home. I say, fantastic. The delay in my arrival has heightened a tingle of anticipation I feel upon seeing you once again, my darling. If you travel a lot as I do, on a Friday night, if you're in Sydney and you want to get back to Melbourne, there's a 10:30 plane. If it doesn't take off before 11 o'clock, guess what? You don't go anywhere because of noise abatement. And you often see it's 10:30 and we're sort of waiting for them to give the boarding announcement. And they say, ladies and gentlemen, there's a slight delay to flight 438, and you see everybody saying, you know what it is, what you say to other drivers. Me, I say, fantastic. Because I prefer them to fix the plane on the ground rather than try and fix it in mid-air. You know, you wouldn't want somebody climbing out the back door and putting oil in the left-hand engine or anything, would you? So I'm always happy, I'm always fantastic. Now I can see some of you looking at me with utter disbelief. Well, here's a good reason. 85% of people who die between the hours of midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning. So if you woke up this morning, how should you feel? Fantastic. So I want you to remember that word and try and say it. I've only got to get you to say it for 7 days to alter your habits. So let's have a go. Now, how do we feel? Fantastic. Oh, that's not too bad, not too bad. Let's do it again. How do we feel? Fantastic. How's this talk going to be? Fantastic. Nice, lovely. So my talk today is lies our mothers told us, but I'll sort of wander a bit and maybe do it. But you can see some people, you know, didn't listen to their mother. I mean, look at this bloke here. Look at him. Did he eat his crusts? Remember what mother said? Eat your crusts. I'm looking at some of you with glasses on, and I realise you took no notice when somebody said to you, keep on doing that and you'll go blind. I can see that here, you know. What couldn't you do for 2 hours after you ate lunch when you were a kid? Swim. Go swimming. Yeah, now our kids swim in the pool eating sandwiches, don't they? And I'd like some of the little buggers, yeah, to go, but they don't. Who likes Brussels sprouts? Yeah, they're beautiful, aren't they? Done bacon and a bit of garlic. Who liked them when they were kids? Oh, revolting stuff, yeah. What used to happen then? My mum would put them up on a plate. And I'd say, I don't want them, Mum. She said, you're going to eat them. I don't want them. She said, listen son, there are thousands of starving kids in China who would love those things. I could never understand why I had to be the middleman. Why couldn't they have sent the bloody Brussels sprouts direct to China for those poor starving kids? There were some interesting things. Isn't it interesting how the house used to smell and you knew what you were having for dinner when she was cooking cabbage? Remember how long they used to cook cabbage? They put it in there and the veggies and some corned beef and all that sort of stuff. And she'd tell me it was good for me. No, it wasn't. Never did anything for me. What did you get? And I bet there are a few who suffer from this. If you sat on wet concrete. Farmer Giles, didn't you? Yeah. Oh, terrible stuff. They were all sort of little lies. The one that used to get to me is I'd come home from school, and I guess you the same, and Mum said, what are you doing? So go out to play, Mum. Okay, she says, but before you go out to play, you put on clean knickers. Because if you're in an accident, did you get that? I used to think up until the age of 40 that sitting in the ambulance were 2 first aiders and a knicker checker. And that the ambulance would race up, woo, and the first aiders would stay back. And the knicker checker would get out and he'd go over and look at you and he'd check your knickers and say, no, dirty knickers, and off they'd go. I thought that's how they rendered assistance, all that sort of stuff. Oh, talking about rendering assistance. You know, when you walk up Swanston Street and you get to Collins Street, and over there's the Town Hall, there's the Manchester Unity Building. You remember the Manchester Unity Building? Do you remember the Manchester Unity murders, by the way? About, well, I haven't worked there for 30 years or so, somebody got into where the jewellers were, lined up 3 of them and shot them at the back of the head. Yeah. I was sort of acting chief executive of Manchester Unity that day, and I've often thought about it. You know, there were these 3 guys lying there face down, shot in the back of the head. How would you be being the second guy in the queue?
One of them was a friend of mine.
One of them was a friend of yours. Oh, terrible stuff. Never found out who did that. One day, the police asked me to come down and observe a guy cracking one of the jewellers' safes? Yes. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I've been done for safe cracking 1 million times. He said, this is the first time I've ever cracked a safe under police supervision. He was opening the safes to see what was there and all that sort of stuff. Interesting, Manchester Unity building was built a floor a week, and it was done by members. And now you can do a tour to go by the 12th up to the 12th floor, because they have not been able to remove the board table. When they put in this huge board table there, solid, they put it in before they put the roof on. So now you can sign up, do a tour of the Manchester Unity building, which is quite nice, and have lunch or breakfast or something afterwards. I don't know whether you do it at the board table or something. Interesting. Has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, does it? But you'll find I intended. So I'm walking up Swanston Street. There's Town Hall, there's the Manchester Unity building, and we stop at the lights like this, waiting for the lights to change to green. And they're still red, and a bloke with a seeing eye a dog, steps off the curb and starts to walk across. Well, as a group, we all... There was a sand truck coming down the hill past the Regent Theatre. How that went through the lights and missed him, I don't know. A tram went ding, 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 almost went off the tracks to pull up. A taxi coming the other way missed him, went onto the curb, just missed him. The lights changed and we started to walk across. And I look at this bloke, and there he is. He's giving the seeing eye dog a biscuit. Well, I had to help him. I said, excuse me, sir, you're rewarding that dog and it almost killed you. He said, I know. I'm finding out where its arse is so I can pick it up the bum. Finding out where its head is so I can pick it up. And just something interesting happened. There's a few of you golfers. I know Roger is a golfer and a lot of you golfers. Some of you probably know somebody this has happened to, but a mate of mine a few weeks or so ago said he was going to give up golf. And we said, why's that? You're hitting a long ball. He said, yeah, well, that's the trouble. He said, I'm hitting a long ball, but I can't see where it goes. He said, isolate. I said, don't worry, the club's got all the members. We now have ball spotters. And he said, what's a ball spotter? He said, ball spotter is a guy that comes out, follows you around like a caddy, and watches where your ball goes. He says, wow, that's a new flash of light. So he gets to the clubhouse the next week and he gets on the first tee and he said, where's my ball spotter? Well, a little old guy who would have been 87, 95 or something if it was today, came out and he said, I'm your ball spotter. He said, your ball spotter? He said, yeah, don't worry about me, 20/20 vision. He said, righto, let's go. So he gets on the tee, the little ball spotter comes out and stands behind him. He goes, bang, a beauty just off to the left, way down there, and there's the ball spotter. Watching. And my test to him, where did it go? He said, can't remember. So all right, some of you have heard that before, haven't you? So why do I talk about lies that our mothers told us? Well, really, they were little bits of truth, weren't they? Things that were good to know. There were good things, like if you're in trouble, ask a policeman. Now I couldn't ask a policeman, they're all, still at school, they're so young, aren't they? Or too short, or too wide, or something funny that kills. So Mum always had these great ideas, great things that she'd get me to try and remember, and we do remember them, don't we? The things that were important in life. And nowadays, kids don't seem to get that sort of advice. In fact, statistically, kids spend more time with strangers than they do with their own parents. So I'm really here to appeal to you to remind some of the kids of life in your life, or that you influence, of some of the good things you know. Because I've been a professional speaker, I've often dined out with the chief executive or something like that. Some of them, if you have a look at kids today, don't even know how to hold a knife and fork. When you were a kid, if you didn't hold the knife the right way, the fork way, what did Dad do? He reached over and belted you on the knuckles and you learned how to do it. I did a thing for Queen Scouts a couple of years ago. There's 40 kids there and they were sitting having their lunch. And I was watching them holding it, terrible, and I said to the scout, why don't we sit them at a table, I'll talk during the meal and I'll tell them all how to do it. He said, well, that'll be difficult. I said, why? He said, who could we get to help? I said, well, those people up there, he said, they are their parents. They didn't know either. In fact, it was interesting, when I said we'd sit the kids at table, it was the first time for 60% of those kids. Most kids in that group had never eaten sitting at a table with their family. I think that's what we used to do always, wasn't it? Yeah. So we've got an opportunity to influence the kids or grandkids or people in our life. I often say to groups of progress, wouldn't it be great if you wrote down just one rule you heard that worked for you and we put it in a book and we gave it to kids? It would be a great set of memories for them. Now look, I'm not just making these things up. Let's talk about my children. Now I know you'd hate to hear about that. I had 4 kids. When I was out running, I used to say to them, why don't you come running with me? A few kids ran 5 kilometres a day. By the end of a week, it'd be 35 kilometres from home. But I could never get them to come running. And of course, one of the reasons my wife and I stayed married, we didn't get divorced, is that neither of us wanted the kids. How it is. Anyway. It's slow, this group, aren't they? Anyway, we had 4 children. Son, daughter, 3rd child, Jeremy. Jeremy was what the family counsellors call a problem child. Well, no, I call him a problem child. The family counsellors said he was a challenge. Jeremy left school before anybody told us. In fact, he'd left school 12 months before we heard about it. He used to go off to school every day, but not go to school. He had a habit of finding things before they were lost, but he did have some good habits. Jeremy was very good as a gardener. He was growing some things in the shed. And the police came and removed them. But he was an enormously enthusiastic kid. He left school before he could really read and write. And I said, son, what are you going to do? And he said, I'm going on the dole. Can you imagine how I would feel about that? No son of mine goes on the dole. I said, and this was years ago, of course. I said, how many jobs they got in the jobs place? Remember, we used to have employment service then. You looked and he said, there's none. I said, well, son, get me the local paper. And isn't it a shame we've seen the demise of our local papers? Gee, they used to be good. The best things for promoting events and all sorts of things were local papers. So Jeremy got me the local paper and I said, pick out the job you'd like. Glad that he didn't pick out brain surgeon. He picked out apprentice chef. And it was this time when apprentices were like Hensley's apprenticeships. So Jeremy said he'd love to go for this job. So I said, okay, what's it say, Jeremy? To apply, he said, it says here, please send us your resume. I said, resume, son? He said, yeah, resume. He said, I can't do that. I said, why? He said, I haven't got one. So, of course, there was an opportunity. I have a rule in life, a rule I've taught every business I've ever spoken to, that if you do what everybody else does, you'll get what everybody else gets. Now, when it comes to job seeking and it asks for a resume or a CV, what does everybody put in? A resume. Take the name off the top. How do they look? Pretty much the same. I know as a boss looking at resumes, it drives you up the wall. So Jeremy never submitted a resume. He knew the secret of my car number plates. My car number plates are Wiffle. W-I-I-F-F. And that's my reminder to all my clients, everybody that's ever heard me talk, that if I want you to do something, I have to answer your question, which is, what's in it for me? Have you ever seen a resume that really has a what's in it for me? So Jeremy and I sat down and I said, put yourself in the boss's shoes. I have a little story that is, you cannot know a person until you've spent 3 months in their moccasins. You know, the trouble with us is we don't think about how the person we want to sell, how the person we'd like to join Probus thinks. We don't know how they feel about that car or what they want. We've got to understand them. So what are the sorts of things you would look for in a young person as an apprentice? Look surely for punctuality, honesty, enthusiasm, team play, commitment. How many times have you ever seen a resume or a CV that talks about those things? Not at all. So Jeremy and I wrote a letter. The letter started, I'm just the person you want, for these reasons, and gave 5 reasons. Said, I'm a team player, because I was in Glen Waverley Hawks this year, and we won the premiership. In fact, I'm a leader, because I was captain of the Waverley Hawks when we won the premiership. And it gave a few other reasons. I understand from the guy that owned the bakery that 500 kids put in for that job. 499 CVs and the Jeremy letter. Within a day or two of sending that letter, Jeremy got a phone call. Could he come for an appointment? I heard later they sent the letter around all the management saying, this is the sort of kid we want. But then there was a problem. Jeremy didn't know how to go to an interview. Most people don't. Most people think resumes are going to get you the job. No, resumes are only going to get you the appointment. Do you know, in my visits around the place, I particularly do this with when you have a mixed Probus meeting, so I say, shake hands with the person alongside you. And you know, most men will go the farmer handshake. Most women sort of give a weak. What did your mother say about weak handshakes? You can't trust them. So many people meet a person and without saying a word have told them, you can't necessarily trust me. I hope this doesn't upset you, Ken. I'll show you the correct way of shaking hands. This is the correct way. I'll do it. You just relax. Be the normal limp wrist, Ken. See this bit in here between the thumb and the first finger. You engage that like that, and then you just wrap your hands gently around mine. Don't squeeze them. And that says to people, you can trust me. It also can, you'll be interested to know, this part here is a mildly erogenous zone.
Doesn't do anything for me.
Well, in that case, why don't you let go of the hand? Now, interestingly, one of the most important things in establishing contact is human touch. You know, we know that if you touch, you're working in a supermarket, and he's anxious, isn't he? Can I have the whole arm now? You know that if I touch you between there and there, that is, what's the word? Interfering with you. I can touch you between here and here. So if I worked at Coles and somebody said to me, can you show me where the baked beans are? I wouldn't say follow me like they do. I just touch them lightly on the wrist and lead them. And do you know what happens, we find? Where there is human contact, 17% more sales. Used cars, 17%, just mere touching. Now boys, I haven't given you a licence to go out and touch up everybody you see, but it's worth knowing. Worth knowing. Now the other thing is, when I shake hands like that, I also lean back a bit, not heavily, and guess what I've done? With a bit of strength, I've just released his left cheek, right cheek, from the seat. I've just interrupted his thinking. Because you see, if you are reading resumes, guess what? You get into a rut. And if I'm going to make an impact on you, I've got to make that, just that slight change. So, you shake hands. And then Jeremy said, because most people shut up when they're being interviewed, wait to be interviewed. Jeremy said, thank you, Mr. Smith, for seeing me today. I know it's been a particularly busy time for you. How did Jeremy know that? He'd done a bit of research for the job. How come it's so busy, Mr. So-and-so? And of course, what's he done? He's got that man talking about his favourite person, himself. And he just kept asking who, why, when, and the conversation went on. Some stage later, the man said to Jeremy, oh, tell me a little bit about yourself. Guess what most people say in answer to that question? There's not a lot to tell. There isn't much. Most people have never learned to market themselves. Remember their mother said, don't boast, don't show off. So most people can't even answer that question. I'm talking about people younger and less wise than us, of course. And Jeremy said, you'll remember the letter I sent you? And they said, yes. He said, I've been turning over in my mind which of my qualities might be most suited to this position. Isn't it nice to have a dad who can speak and put a few words together? So he said, one of the things I didn't tell you in that letter is that I never missed a day's work. He said, but on the way home from a temporary, a part-time job I had, I was on the train to Glen Waverley and was attacked by some hoods. I had 19 stitches in my scalp and I never missed a day's work. When do you reckon Jeremy got the job? Right there and then. That letter, called the Jeremy letter, anybody that wants it can get a copy of it. It's literally got hundreds of people jobs as they learned not to do what their school teachers taught them about writing the resume, writing the CV, all that sort of stuff. It works for everybody. Somebody said to me, oh, I've applied for 19 jobs and haven't got anything. I said, well, if you do the same thing over and over, what would you get? Same result. Why don't you try something differently? And they said, oh no, it wouldn't work for me. And you know, that's one of the things I see. So many people say, oh no, it wouldn't work for me. At the age of 40, I'd been fairly successful. By the time I was 40, I'd worked for Alan Bond as a director of some of his companies. It was great. best years of my life for the 5 years I had with Bondi. I guess most of you remember, don't you, the day was about 6 o'clock in the morning, and our boat was leading, and how proud we are. And yet most people remember the things he did wrong rather than the things he did right. So when I turned 40, I looked in front of the mirror. I didn't like the person I saw. I saw a person who was about 30 kilograms heavier than I am now. I smoked 100 cigarettes a day and had never done any exercise in my life. If I was out driving and I saw a runner on the road, I'd try and get him with the bumper bar, or we'd go around the block, one of the kids would get him with a door. I was committed to non-exercising. And yet on that day, for some reason I don't know, I made a commitment. I decided to lose some weight. I lost 50 kilograms in 6 months. I decided to give up smoking. I stopped smoking 100 cigarettes in 3. And I decided to do some exercise. At 40, I'd never done any exercise in my life. I can remember committing, setting some goals. Hey, tell your kids some lies about setting goals. Tell your grandkids. You know, most people in business I talk to, most people who are wanting a job, most kids who come to see me for help or going for an interview, I say, what are your goals? And guess what most of them say? I don't have anything. I don't have any. Most people aim at nothing and hit it with an amazing accuracy. Hey, just talking about amazing accuracy. I was driving down the freeway, going through Pakenham, hasn't that growing, and suddenly I look out the side, and running alongside me is a chicken. It's a 3-legged bloody chicken. So I put my foot down and got up to about 80 and it kept up. Got a bit faster, it went faster. I got a bit faster, it went past me, a couple of kilometres down the road, this 3-legged chicken, and ran into a farm. Well, because I'm a curious guy, I went and drove into the farm and said, excuse me, you got 3-legged chickens? I said, yes. I said, 3-legged chickens, what's that all about? She said, well, there's 3 of us. My husband, my son, and me. And we all like the drumsticks of a chicken. So we've been breeding 3-legged chickens. I said, that's bloody amazing. How do they taste? She says, I don't know, we've never been able to catch one. So when it came to losing that weight and doing those things, I set some goals. I found somebody who would do the things I wanted to do. So I said, can I do what you do when it comes to training and running? Because I've decided that I always get a buzz when I turn off the road here. I decided I was going to run the Frankston to Melbourne Marathon. I was going to be the first former fat runner to do it. Most importantly, I was going to do it sub 3 hours. Because if you run marathons, breaking 3 hours is the aim. It's like climbing Mount Everest from mountaineers. So I found Rossi. Rossi could run, Rossi could do all these things. When Rossi ran track, I ran track. When Rossi ran distance, I ran distance. When Rossi ran hills, I ran hills. When Rossi pumped weights, I pumped weights. When Rossi ate carbohydrates, I ate carbohydrates. When Rossi went home to bed with his missus, I went home. But guess what? I'll never forget the first day I ran a sub 3 hour marathon, my very first. I'll never forget throwing my arms up and running through the tape in 2 hours, 58 minutes and 58 seconds. And so many people said to me, Winnow, I didn't think you could do it. And I said, I never thought that I couldn't. What the mind can conceive, the heart can achieve. Where did I learn all this stuff from? Let me check the time. I learned it from a bloke I just talked about. You see, many of us remember that American. Many of us remember how good it was to win that last race. People say it was our skipper, John Bertrand. Yeah, John Bertrand was a great skipper. So was his opposition. Maybe it was our tactician, maybe it was our navigator, maybe it was the crew. Yeah, they were all great. But the reason I reckon we won the America's Cup was very simple. It was a short, fat, former Pommy Sino, called Alan Bond. And you know, from the moment it was decided, and he decided, that we would win the America's Cup, there was never a question of if we win the America's Cup. It was just a matter of when. We had 3 attempts to win that America's Cup. I never heard Alan ever say when we win it, if we win it, only when we win it. What the mind can achieve, the heart can succeed. It's easy. I have a saying, and I've told my kids and they know. I tell many of my close friends, if you want to, you can do anything that you want to do, if you want to do it enough. But it's the if you want to do it enough. You know, when I was giving up smoking, you know what all your friends do? Offer you cigarettes. If you're trying to eat, they offer you great things you love to eat. When I started exercising, I didn't start running marathons. I can remember those first few weeks, months. For my first run, it was midnight. I didn't want anybody to see a fat man like me trying to run. I decided the goals would be I would run the distance between up to 2 lampposts, then walk the distance between 2 lampposts, then run the distance. And I can tell you, when I ran that distance, it seemed like I would never get there. When I walked it, it went like that. But I gradually changed it. I went from running 1 lamppost distance to running 2, and walking 1 and running. And then somebody said, do you want to be in a fun run? I said, yeah, I'd love to. What's a fun run? I didn't know. I can remember the first sporting injury I had was at the age of 41 when I got that heel thing. I just kept running on it. I didn't know you could have sporting injuries. I didn't know you could have any way to get them fixed. I kept on running. Then somebody said, what about this marathon? And that's when I conceived that. When I decided that I might have a go, that there's an opportunity. And those are the things I've learned from the lies I've heard. Talking about lies, if out where we are, there's a few real estate agencies around, and one had in their window a sign saying, help wanted, must be computer literate, know how to write an Excel spreadsheet, and be multilingual. So the receptionist sitting there in the office, and a Labrador takes the notice off the window and wanders over to the receptionist and wags its tail and waves the notice. She didn't know what to do. She said, hey boss. And the boss came out and said, what about it? She said, I think this dog is applying for the job. The boss said, well, let's get rid of this. Said to the dog, you have to be able to use a computer. The dog wandered over to the computer, sat down, wrote a 100-word story in MS Word, came back, showed it to him. He said, well, no, that's very good. He said, of course, you've got to be able to do an Excel spreadsheet. Dog wagged his tail, went over, opened up Excel, set down a line of comments, a line of figures, so across, got a paper, had it printed off and said and took the Excel spreadsheet off. And said, very impressive, very impressive. But what about being multilingual? That's got you. The dog just sat there, wagged its tail, looked at the boss and said, meow. Very stale. The other thing that's happened to me is, of course, I'm getting old, and I was thinking that my wife is going deaf. Now, I said to my doctor, how do you check that out? Because she's a very intolerant woman, you know, she won't do what I want her to do very often. So she said, simple. She said, you start about 40 metres away, 40 feet away, and you say, darling, what are we having for dinner? If she doesn't answer, you move 4 or 5 feet forward and say, darling, what are we having for dinner? If she still doesn't answer, you walk another 5 feet forward and say, darling, what are we having dinner? Finally, you get up right behind her. And she says, and you say to her, darling, what are you having for dinner? And I did, and my wife turned around and said, I've told you 5 times. We're having chicken. So that's mama. So where are we with all of this? Why am I advocating lies? Why am I advocating stories? Why am I... Well, I look at our community today, and it seems to me that most people, you excluded, oh, by the way, you do know the statistic, don't you? Just have a quick look at the person on your left-hand side. Quick look at the person on your left-hand side. Quick look at the person on your right-hand side. Now, I hope this is reassuring. 1/3 of the people on this earth are ugly. So if the person on that side of you is okay, and the person on that side of you okay, you've got a problem. Little reassuring statistic. So I've just begun sharing stuff with people and saying, perhaps it's not up to other people to do about it, to complain about all these things that are happening. Maybe we should, in our own little way, using some of the lies, some of the homilies, some of the stories we know, some of the things we've got, to maybe make a difference. I got this thing, this badge here from Rotary for services to one of their projects, one of their things called RILA, which I think is one of the best things they run. It's for young people thinking about what they're going to do in the world. And the other day, not the other day, about 3 years ago, I was sitting at my computer and an email pinged in. And you know, I never observed the rule that you don't look at them when they come in. I can't help myself, I looked at it. And it said, Winnow, you don't know me. He said, about 12, 14 years ago, you spoke at RILA. There were 30 or 40 of us young kids there doing the program. And he said, you spoke to me. Well, I never speak directly to anybody. I try and look at everybody. But, you know, if the student is willing, the teacher arrives. He said, I have to tell you that 12 years ago, I was dragged into going to that program. He said, but you spoke directly to me. I wasn't going to do year 12. I wasn't going to do uni. I was going to drop out. I was going to go on the dole. But you changed. You said you can do anything you want to do if you want to do enough. He said, I'm just writing to let you know that now 13 years later, I'm the resident surgeon at such and such a hospital in London. He said, thank you for doing it. I didn't do it. He did it. But at least somebody gave him some ideas. Somebody gave him some tools. Somebody. And that's our opportunity. Now we're towards the end of our life. There is so much wisdom that you all have. So much. And it's so easy to share it. It's so easy to share it. You just need to put something up here. Share it with one of your kids. Share it with one of your grandkids. And help them gain all that's possible in this life. To know what they can achieve. And I'll tell you what, when you do that, life really is fantastic. Men of Provis, men of Morris Provis, thank you for the opportunity of being able to share with you today. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have too.